The music stopped when Nyra Loom touched the threshold. Not because she was late, not because she was important, because on Halcyon Crown Station, in the crystal-lit Hall of Tides, everyone had been trained since birth to recognize danger by instinct. And instinct had just turned its head toward a red-skinned woman in a rain-dark coat. For one suspended heartbeat, the wedding became a painting. Nobles frozen mid-toast, bioluminescent chandeliers dripping blue light over silver tables, the groom's ceremonial blade half raised, the bride's veil caught in slow airflow like captured moonlight. Then sound rushed back all at once, strings, whispers, laughter sharpened at the edges. Nyra kept walking. She did not hurry. She did not bow. She crossed the marble floor as if she had every right to be there, even with station security tracking her from 3 balconies and 6 mirrored pillars. At the center dais, King Valor of House Serath watched her approach with the expression of a man calculating 10 outcomes in real time and liking none of them. "Nyra Loom," he said, voice amplified by the hall's acoustic lattice. "Your invitation appears unusual." A ripple of uneasy amusement passed through the guests. Nyra reached into her coat. Half the guards lifted pulse spears. She pulled out a thin obsidian card and set it on the gold and glass wedding table between the 2 joined family crests. "Gift," she said. The card flashed once and projected a rotating map of the station's lower rings, maintenance shafts, coolant lines, service rails. 3 corridors pulsed in red, bomb routes. The hall went silent again. "Your Majesty," Nyra said, amber eyes steady on the king, "if this wedding reaches the oath joining in 47 minutes, one wing detonates. If it reaches the seal exchange in 54, all 3 go." No one laughed this time. The guest nobody wanted officially, Nyra Loom was an independent memory forensic consultant. Unofficially, she was the person institutions called when truth was buried under too many signatures. King Valor knew her reputation. So did every diplomat in attendance. He also knew the politics of this wedding were bigger than vows and silk. His son, Prince Kaelan Serath, was marrying Lady Elira Dren of the Voss Coalition, the alliance that controlled trade lanes through the Lumen Strait. This marriage would end a 2-generation cold conflict and open grain routes to starving belt colonies. If the wedding failed, worlds would starve by quarter's end. If the wedding exploded, no one would debate tariffs again because there would be no one left to sign them. Valor rose slowly. "Clear the hall," barked Marshal Taryn. "No," Nyra said before the guards moved. Every head snapped toward her. "Evacuation stampedes trigger secondary charges," she continued. "There are pressure plates hidden in service choke points. Whoever built this wanted panic as the ignition." "How do you know?" asked the bride, voice controlled but thin. Nyra looked at her. "Because whoever built it used old insurgent logic from the Karen dock bombings. Same pattern, same cruelty." A murmur spread like crackling wire. Karen dock had killed 2,000 civilians 10 years ago. The groom, Prince Kaelan, stepped off the dais despite protocol and walked directly toward Nyra, ignoring his father's warning glance. He was tall, ceremonial armor unfastened at the throat, face too young for the weight of 3 systems. "Can you stop it?" he asked. Nyra held his gaze. "Yes. But I need full access and no committee debate." "Granted," Kaelan said immediately. King Valor's jaw tightened. "This is still my station." "And your son's wedding," Nyra replied. "Pick which you want to save first." For 3 sharp seconds, the king looked like he might throw her out himself. Then he turned to security. "She has command authority over explosive response. Anyone obstructing becomes obstruction." The hall breathed again, but shakily. Nyra tapped her wristband. "Mara, you hearing this?" A dry voice crackled in her ear. "Hearing your flair for dramatic entrances, yes. Patch me into station maintenance net. Already in. Also, you owe me 2 weeks of sleep for this." Nyra almost smiled. Almost. To the bride in glass light, the wedding party was moved, not evacuated, to the hall's inner conservatory, a circular chamber of living glass gardens shielded by blast-resistant petals that could close in an emergency. Nyra stood over a floating tactical projection with Kaylan, Lady Elira, and 6 engineers trembling through diagnostics. Elira watched Nyra's hands as she dragged zones across the map. "You came unarmed," Elira said. Nyra did not look up. "I'm armed with context. That has never reassured me." "It shouldn't." The prince frowned at the map. 3 routes, can't we just seal those corridors?" "Not safely," Nyra said. "If my model is right, charge clusters are tied to thermal imbalance sensors. Hard sealing spikes pressure and triggers fail dead." Vaylor entered the conservatory with 2 admirals and an expression carved from old stone. "Status," Nyra pointed. "We have 40 minutes. I need your station architect." "Dead," said the king. Nyra looked up sharply. 3 months ago, shuttle failure. Natural. Investigation said yes. Nyra held his gaze a beat too long. "I would like that report." Vaylor stiffened. "Later. Now." For a moment the king's eyes flashed with something close to anger. Then, reluctantly, he signaled an aide. Elira, who had been quiet, said softly, "If this is political sabotage, my coalition will be blamed either way." Nyra met her eyes. "Then don't give anyone a clean villain." Elira lifted her chin. "I don't run from fights." "Good," Nyra said. "I need you visible." The bride blinked. "Visible, calm, public, breathing. If the hall senses panic, rumor becomes ignition. Your people must see you steady." Elira's lips parted in surprise, then she nodded once. "Understood." Kaylan looked between them, then gave a small, incredulous laugh. "I'm marrying a storm and taking orders from lightning." Nyra deadpanned. "Congratulations on your taste." For the first time since she arrived, someone in the room smiled on purpose. 3. The fighter who didn't fight news bled through station channels anyway. It always did. In 10 minutes, whispers became feeds. Threat at royal wedding, unknown operative in hall, coalition plot, Sarath false flag. Nyra ignored all of it and led a 12-person response team into Lower Ring Delta, where polished royal corridors gave way to wet metal lungs of the station. Pipes sweating coolant, catwalks humming with old current, maintenance drones sleeping in nests like folded insects. A young security lieutenant walked beside her, pulse rifle ready. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "with respect, if we spot hostile actors, what are your engagement rules?" Nyra crouched at a junction panel and peeled back a magnetic strip to reveal a thin filament wire. "Don't fire unless fired on." He stared. "You're not a combat lead." "People keep calling me a fighter," Nyra said, clipping the wire and routing it through a signal dampener. "Mostly I fight narratives." She nodded to the team. "Mark this line, it's not a detonator, it's a witness loop. Someone wants sensor logs to show coalition personnel in zones they never entered." The lieutenant's face changed. "Planted evidence." "Exactly." They moved deeper. At junction K-19, they found the first charge nest, elegant, compact, and horrifyingly clever. The core wasn't explosive itself. It was a synchronization node linking smaller charges spread across structural ribs. Remove it wrong, and the rib charges wake. Nyra scanned it, then swore under her breath. "What?" asked the lieutenant. "Fingerprint lock, so we find the installer. We don't have that time." She took a thin probe from her sleeve and plugged into the node. Holographic glyphs spun, then resolved into a puzzle like key lattice. The lieutenant watched her work with dawning awe. "How do you know this architecture?" Nyra's expression went flat. "Because 10 years ago, someone I loved helped design anti-seizure failsafes for hospital stations." He stared. She continued quietly, "And someone else weaponized the same math." In 5 minutes, she bypassed the lock, severed sync, and tagged the node safe. 1 route down, 2 to go. Her comm chirped. Nyra, you're trending." "Nyra, I don't care." "Mara, you should. Half the station thinks you're a coalition assassin. Other half thinks you're the king's secret fixer." "Nyra, any third half with facts?" "Mara, working on it. Also, architect death report just decrypted." "Nyra, this was not an accident." Nyra slowed. Say it. Myra's voice thinned. Cardiac implant override from inside station admin. Somebody remotely stopped his heart. Nyra closed her eyes once hard. Send me names with access. Already did. Top of list is. Nyra stopped walking. Chancellor Orrin Vesk, the king's chief advisor. 4 glass, silk, and knives back in the conservatory. The wedding resumed in miniature for optics. Not the ceremony, just the image of continuity. Lady Elira stood before a bank of cameras giving a controlled statement. There is a security incident under containment. There is no coalition aggression. There is no royal collapse. There is only work being done. Her voice was clear. Her hands did not shake. Prince Kaelan stood beside her, not in front, not behind. Equal. That image would later appear in every history feed under a dozen captions. In the shadows near the conservatory doors, Chancellor Orrin Vesk watched them with a face like carved porcelain and eyes that never blinked enough. Nyra entered, wet with condensate and grease, coat streaked with dust. Vesk stepped forward smoothly. Ms. Loom, you look as if you've crawled through the station's throat. Nyra peeled off gloves. I did. Have you identified who is responsible? She looked at him too long. Working theory. His smile remained perfectly diplomatic. I suggest caution. In crises, premature accusations tear alliances. Funny, Nyra said. That sounds rehearsed. The king approached, impatient. Report. First route neutralized, Nyra said. Second route likely in coolant transit behind North Chapel. Third near Oath Chamber dais supports. Vaylor nodded grimly. Nyra handed him a data slate. And this, your architect was murdered. The king read one line, then another. Color drained from his face. Who authorized this file access? Vesk demanded sharply. I did, said Vaylor, voice low and dangerous. Vesk recovered instantly. Your Majesty, in the middle of a terror incident, this could be disinformation. Nyra spoke without looking at him. Could be, so I cross-checked implant key signatures with admin relay logs. She finally turned, amber eyes bright. The same admin path that touched the implant pinged K-19 before the bomb net went live. Vesk's expression didn't break. His pupils did, tiny, fast. Nyra saw it, so did Kaelan. The prince went very still. Chancellor, he said quietly, where were you 3 months ago at 0213 station time? Vesk smiled almost kindly. Highness, this is absurd. Where? Vesk's mask thinned. Serving your father as always. Nyra stepped closer, voice flat. You mean serving your portfolio? Vaylor thundered, enough. The room froze. The king looked from his son to his advisor to Nyra, and for one naked second everyone saw what power really costs, choosing between trusted loyalty and unbearable math. Then Vaylor spoke, each word like iron. Chancellor Orrin Vesk, surrender your comm keys and remain under guard. Gasps erupted. Vesk's eyes hardened into something finally honest. You think this fixes anything? He laughed once, bitter, contemptuous. You still don't understand, Vaylor. This marriage ends your line. I refuse to let a trade pact dissolve a dynasty. Kaelan took one step forward, voice shaking with fury. You plan to kill thousands for inheritance politics. Vesk looked at him with pity that felt like poison. I plan to preserve order, Nyra said softly. People who say that usually mean themselves. Vesk moved faster than anyone expected, wrist flick, hidden injector toward the king's neck. Nyra intercepted, twisting his arm, slamming him into a glass column before the guards reacted. Injector clattered across tile. The hall screamed. Nyra pinned him, forearm at his throat, expression ice calm. Marshal, she said, breathing hard but steady, take your order preserver. As guards dragged Vesk away, he shouted back at Vaylor, You are not king enough to survive mercy. Nyra watched him go, then turned to the king. You've got 22 minutes. 5, the daughter nobody claimed the second route was worse than the first. Coolant transit ran beneath the North Chapel where ceremonial singers were still stationed to keep appearances of calm. Nyra and the team crawled through maintenance tunnels barely wider than shoulders while frost formed on metal ribs and their breath smoked in blue air. At midpoint, they found not only sync nodes, but a dead man relay keyed to biometric heartbeat. "Vesk," whispered the lieutenant. Nyra scanned. No. Smaller print profile, different gate pattern from pressure logs. Then who armed it? Nyra read the signature twice, disbelieving. Arya Vesk. The lieutenant frowned. Chancellor's daughter, she's 17. Nyra's jaw tightened. 17 is old enough to be radicalized by a father who calls murder duty. Her comm chirped with Myra. Nyra, Arya's movements show she's on station unaccounted for. Track her. Trying, she's ghosting through old choir passages. Nyra's pulse jumped. She's heading for the Oath Chamber. She looked at the second node, then at time. Lieutenant, you take point on relay disarm. Follow my sequence exactly. If it beeps twice, stop breathing and don't touch anything. He stared. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. She shoved tools into his hands and sprinted back through the tunnel. The Oath Chamber was empty except for hanging lights and old vows etched in 6 dead languages along the walls, and Arya Vesk. Small for her age, formal dress torn at the hem, dark hair damp with sweat, hands trembling over a final trigger module mounted beneath the central dais. Nyra slowed as she entered. Arya, the girl spun, eyes wild, trigger raised. Stay back. Nyra lifted both hands. Okay, I'm back. Arya's voice cracked. He said they'd ruin everything. He said if I didn't help, our house would be erased. He said no one would protect us. Nyra moved one step closer. Your father lied. Arya screamed, don't say that. Nyra stopped. Outside, faint through thick walls, the wedding strings resumed, a desperate attempt at normalcy. Arya started crying without lowering the trigger. I never wanted people to die. He said it would scare them, just scare. Nyra kept her voice gentle. People who build bombs don't build scare. Arya shook harder. If I stop now, he'll hate me. Nyra's expression softened with something like ache. He already used you, she said. That isn't love. That's conscription. Arya's fingers spasmed on the device. Nyra saw it and spoke fast. Look at me, breathe with me. In, out. Arya sobbed, trying, failing, trying again. Nyra stepped close enough now to see freckles across the girl's nose, smudged mascara, the terror of a child raised in a palace and trained to fear exile more than death. My name is Nyra Loom, she said. I keep what can still be saved. You are still savable. Arya whispered. I killed them. You armed a system, Nyra said. You haven't ended it, not yet. Put the trigger in my hand. Arya stared at her for a long, shaking second. Then she dropped to her knees and let the device fall. Nyra caught it before it hit tile. At that exact moment, every station light flickered. Mara shouted in Nyra's ear, second route clear, third sync waking, 30 seconds. Nyra grabbed Arya's shoulder. Stay behind the pillar, do not move. She dove under the dais, snapped open the trigger housing, and saw the nightmare. A mirrored logic bridge with 2 contradictory lockouts. No time for elegance. No time for perfect. She chose risk. Cut red, bridge yellow, reverse blue, pull core. The device screamed like metal in pain and died. Silence. Then through the chamber floor, a deep vibration passed and faded, the station exhaling. Myra's voice came back, breathless and laughing with relief. You impossible woman, we're green across all routes. Nyra sat on the floor under the dais for 2 full seconds, eyes closed. Then she crawled out and looked at Arya, who was shaking against the pillar. It's over, Nyra said. Arya's face collapsed in sobs. Nyra opened her coat and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. Come on, she said quietly. Let's walk before your knees forget how. 6. The vow when Nyra Ray entered the Hall of Tides. The wedding had reached the point where everyone either believed in miracles or pretended to. Guards lined the perimeters. Diplomats watched like juries. Cameras hovered at respectful distance. Prince Kaelan and Lady Elira stood before the oath arch, hands bound by ceremonial thread, waiting for a signal that might never come. Nyra stepped into the center aisle. King Valor looked at her, searching her face for the answer no one dared ask aloud. Nyra nodded once. Clear! The breath that left that hall sounded like surf. A few guests cried in pure relief. Others sat down abruptly as adrenaline abandoned their legs. Vaylor's shoulders dropped half an inch, the most vulnerable anyone had ever seen him in public. Then Nyra did something unexpected. She guided Arya Vesk into the open. The crowd reacted with fresh shock, whispers cutting hot and fast. Vaylor's voice turned to steel. "Why is she here?" "Because she's a witness," Nyra said. "And because if you punish only what's visible, you teach the next generation to hide better." Arya stood shaking beside her, coat draped like borrowed mercy. Kaelan looked at Arya, then at Nyra, and understood more than anyone expected him to. He turned to his father. "Let her testify under protection," Elira added, voice clear, "and place her in restorative custody, not punitive exile." Vaylor stared at his son and future daughter-in-law, at the alliance they were forging not with bloodlines, but with a different kind of courage. At last he said, "So ordered." Then he looked at Nyra. "You interrupted my son's wedding, commandeered my station, accused my closest advisor, dismantled a bombing network, and lectured my governance in public." Nyra held his gaze. "Accurate summary." A flicker, something dangerously close to amusement, crossed the king's face. "Stay," he said. Nyra blinked once. "For what?" Vaylor turned to the officiant. "Resume ceremony." The officiant, still pale, nodded and lifted the vow codex. Kaelan and Elira faced each other under the arch. Their voices were steady now. "I bind my house to yours in scarcity and surplus. I bind my name to yours in danger and dawn. We are not peace by accident. We are peace by maintenance." When they sealed the vow thread with joined hands, the hall rose in one wave of applause that sounded less like celebration and more like collective release. The wedding was no longer a political performance. It was survival choosing itself. 7. The king's table hours later, after arrests, statements, evidence transfers, and enough security debriefs to drown a lesser court, the royal family held a private post-ceremony meal in a smaller chamber overlooking Halcyon's night side. Nyra should not have been there. She knew it. Everyone knew it. And yet King Vaylor had sent for her by name. The table was intimate by royal standards. Vaylor, Queen Mother Saria, Kaelan, Elira, 2 elder counselors, and Nyra at the far right where ceremonial protocol usually seated distant kin. Nyra arrived in a clean dark suit borrowed from station stores, silver hair braided back, expression neutral and tired. The first course passed mostly in silence. At last the Queen Mother set down her glass and studied Nyra openly. "You pull people from fire," she said. "Then refuse to stand where applause can find you." "Why?" Nyra considered. "Because applause edits memory." Saria nodded slowly. "Good answer." Kaelan leaned forward. "I owe you my life." Nyra shook her head. "You owe your engineers and a frightened girl who put a trigger down." Elira watched her with sharp intelligence. "You keep redirecting credit away from yourself. Is that humility or strategy?" Nyra's mouth twitched. "Both." Vaylor, who had barely touched his meal, finally spoke. "Nyra Loom." "I misjudged you tonight." Nyra said nothing. He continued, voice rougher now that no cameras watched. "I thought you were a complication, you were a spine." The words landed heavily. In Sarath culture, calling someone spine was not compliment. It was kinship language, load-bearing language. One elder counselor shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, with respect, public association with an independent operative of variable reputation." Could be interpreted as, Vaylor cut him off with a glance sharp enough to skin paint. "It will be interpreted," he said, "as my decision." He stood. Everyone at table rose automatically. The king lifted a ceremonial cup, then looked directly at Nyra. "By witness of this table and under House Sarath law, I extend formal kin bond recognition to Nyra Loom, life guardian of royal line and protector of Covenant Night." The chamber went still. Nyra stared at him. Kaelan's eyes widened in delighted shock. Elira let out one soft laugh of disbelief. The elder counselor nearly swallowed his own tongue. Vaylor finished, voice ringing clear. "From this night onward, if she consents, Nyra Loom is family to this house." In old legal language that made her, effectively, the king's daughter by vow. In public language, there was only one headline possible. The king called her family. Nyra, who could defuse bombs and confront tyrants without blinking, looked briefly speechless. Saria smiled, small and knowing. "Careful," the Queen Mother said. "He only makes impossible offers when he means them." All eyes turned to Nyra. She stood very still, then bowed her head, not deeply but sincerely. "I consent," she said. Kalen laughed out loud then, joy cracking through exhaustion. "Well," he said, lifting his cup toward Nyra, "I came to my wedding and gained a sister." Nyra dryly replied, "I came as a guest and inherited a monarchy." Elira clinked glasses with her. "Welcome to the messy side of diplomacy." 8. The price of family mourning turned the station into a battlefield of narratives. Some channels called Nyra a hero, some called her opportunist. Some demanded to know how a king could adopt an outsider during a live crisis. Some spun conspiracy webs so elaborate they collapsed under their own enthusiasm. Nyra stood on a quiet balcony with Mara, reading none of it. Mara handed her coffee. "Congrats! You got promoted from infamous to royalty adjacent." Nyra grimaced. "I preferred the first." Mara leaned on the rail. "You don't have to accept all of it." "I already did." "Then set terms." Nyra looked out at Halcyon's rings turning in pale dawn. She requested a press convocation and appeared beside Vaylor, Kalan, and Elira in the Hall of Tides at midday. Cameras swarmed. The first question came hard. "Nyra Loom, are you now claim holder to Sarath's succession?" Nyra answered without hesitation. "No." Second, is this a political reward? "No, it is legal gratitude with operational obligations." Third, obligations. Nyra looked straight into the lens. "Family is not decoration. If House Sarath claims me, then House Sarath commits to what we defended last night. Transparent infrastructure audits, anti-radicalization protections for minors, witness protection expansion, and public access to station safety logs." A reporter blinked. "You are attaching policy conditions to kinship," Vaylor answered before she could. "Yes," said the king, "she is." The hall erupted in shouted follow-ups. Nyra stood calm in the noise. No swords, no speeches about destiny, just terms. By sunset, 12 stations announced intent to adopt Halcyon-style safety transparency law. By next week, 3 rival houses accused Vaylor of weakness. By month's end, 2 of those houses quietly requested Nyra's consultation on their own systems. Hypocrisy, Nyra had learned, was just fear wearing a nicer coat. 9. The girl in restorative custody Arya Vesk was housed not in prison, but in the quiet wing, a supervised restorative center for high-risk witnesses and manipulated minors. Nyra visited on the 3rd day. Arya sat at a small table, hands wrapped around untouched tea. She looked up as Nyra entered, shame and relief colliding on her face. "I saw the news," Arya whispered. "Your family now?" Nyra sat across from her. "Family is a verb, not a title." Arya blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means we keep showing up." Arya's lip trembled. "They all hate me." "Some do," Nyra said honestly. "Some fear you, some pity you. None of that defines what you do next." Arya stared at her tea. "I don't know what next is." Nyra slid a data pad across the table. "Start here, testimony prep, trauma counseling schedule, technical apprenticeship applications." Arya looked up, startled. "Apprenticeship? You understand systems better than most adults in this station." "I'd rather see you build safety nets than bomb nets." Tears gathered fast in Arya's eyes. "After what I did, why would you help me?" Nyra's answer came without delay. "Because someone taught you fear and called it duty, I refuse to let that be your final education." Arya nodded, crying silently now, and for the first time since the wedding night, her shoulders dropped from around her ears. It looked like oxygen. 10. The new kin weeks passed. The alliance held. Grain routes opened through Lumen Strait. Belt colony ration numbers rose for the first time in a year. Wedding footage that had nearly become a massacre became required training material for emergency governance programs under the module title, Crisis Legitimacy and Structural Courage. Kalan and Elira settled into the difficult rhythm of public partnership. Meetings, trade disputes, ceremonial duties, private arguments, shared strategy, laughter when possible. Nyra took no office, wore no crown, accepted no stipend beyond consulting contracts she published openly. She lived between Loomhouse and Halcyon in a pattern that made protocol officers twitch. Still, she came when called. More often, she called first. One evening, as Halcyon's eclipse began, Vaylor found Nyra alone in the old observatory annex, studying maintenance schematics projected in amber layers. He stood beside her in silence for a while. At last he said, "I never asked what you lost at Karen." Nyra did not look away from the projection. "My brother," she said. "He was on triage duty when the second blast hit." Vaylor swallowed. "I'm sorry," Nyra nodded once. "I spent years wanting punishment to feel like repair. It doesn't." He turned toward her. "And now," she zoomed into a corridor map, highlighting inspection intervals. "Now I like boring systems, the kind that work quietly and deny villains dramatic opportunities." To Nyra's surprise, the king laughed, genuine and tired. "You truly are family," he said. She gave him a sideways glance. "That was your idea. My best this decade." Before she could answer, her calm chirped. Mara's voice, "Nyra, your boring systems just flagged an anomaly in Dock Ring 7. Could be nothing. Could be the universe reminding you it hates vacations." Nyra sighed. "On my way." Vaylor watched her gather data slates and stand. At the door she paused. "Your Majesty," she said. He lifted a brow. "Thank you for choosing truth over convenience that night." Vaylor's gaze softened with old pain and new pride. "Thank you," he replied, "for forcing me to." 11, the line that stayed years later, students touring Halcyon Crown would stop at a small exhibit in the restored Hall of Tides. No jeweled sword, no blood-stained banner, no shattered bomb core, just an obsidian card under glass. Emergency gift card. Covenant night, the guide would explain how a wedding became a test of governance, how an alliance survived because panic was managed, because a frightened girl was treated as salvageable, because a king accepted that family could be chosen by responsibility. Then the guide would point to an inscription engraved beneath the card. She entered as a guest. She stayed as load-bearing kin. Some students would ask, "Is it true the king called her family in front of the whole court?" The guide would smile. "Yes." Others would ask, "Was she a warrior?" The guide would usually answer, "No, she was something harder. She was accountable." And in a quieter voice, for the students paying real attention, "Remember this, civilizations are not saved by perfect people. They are saved by people who, when the music stops, still walk forward." 12, last seen on the anniversary of the wedding, rain found Halcyon's outer glass in soft silver lines. Inside the private family wing, Kaelan and Elira hosted a small dinner. No diplomats, no cameras, just those who had stood on Covenant night and stayed afterward. Mara argued with a royal chef about spices and won. Arya, now in her second year of safety systems engineering, presented a redesign for youth risk detection that the king approved with no edits and obvious pride. Vaylor pretended he wasn't emotional. Failed. At the end of the meal, Kaelan raised a glass. "To the night our wedding nearly ended the station." Elira nudged him. "Very romantic," he grinned. "To the night we learned family is the people who hold the line when the line breaks." He looked at Nyra. "To my sister." Glasses lifted. Nyra, red-skinned and silver-haired and still faintly uncomfortable with ceremonies, looked around the table. At a king who had chosen humility over image, at a queen mother who measured truth better than etiquette, at two rulers building peace by maintenance, at a girl who had stepped back from a trigger and into a future. She lifted her own glass. "To maintenance," she said. Mara snorted affectionately. "That is the most Nyra toast possible." Nyra's smile was small, rare, and entirely real. Outside, stars wheeled over Halcyon Crown Station. Inside, the family born from a near catastrophe laughed into the night, not because history had become simple, but because they had learned to carry what was heavy together. And somewhere in the station archives, under public record and private memory alike, one line stayed highlighted in permanent gold.